What's up guys? Today I'm going to talk to you about this book right here, Man's Search for Meaning. Now this book is probably, if I'm being honest, is one of the most impactful books I've ever read in my life. It completely changed the way I think and it just resonated with me so much. Like when I was reading some of the bits of this book I was just like, oh my god, like that makes sense in my head. And I think personally, if you're a young man, you need to read this book. It will honestly change your perspective on life and the direction that you're going in. So if you feel like a little bit lost or you're not really sure where you're going in life or what you want to do, this book will actually help you, give you a bit of guidance, and it will help explain some of the feelings you have 100% around finding your kind of purpose. So the ideas in this book here gave me some amazing insight into what really drives myself, also what I believe drives other people as well. I always start with my favourite quote. And interestingly, my favourite quote is from this book, but it's not from Viktor Frankl, the author. It's by a philosopher called Friedrich Nietzsche. And it goes like this: "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. To me, this quote means if you know why you're waking up in the morning, if you're laser focused, if you know what your job is on this earth, no matter what comes your way, no matter what obstacles come your way, no matter what adversity comes your way, you can bear all of it. Doesn't matter what comes your way, you will overcome it. However, if we're looking for a quote directly from this book, this is one that I absolutely loved. So it goes like this: "We had to teach the despairing men that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us." And it goes on to kind of explain the quote with a bit of context. "Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual." So whatever is flung at you, how can you best deal with it? Rather than feel sorry for yourself, how can you best deal with that problem? Okay, so as always, I'm going to tell you why I bought the book. I'm going to tell you who wrote it. I'm going to give you a little overview and some of the best bits that I believe are in this book. So when did I buy this book? I can't actually remember when I bought this book specifically, but what I do remember is I remember picking it up in the bookshop. And by the way, if you've never been to a bookshop, you need to go to a bookshop. For one reason, it's probably the most peaceful and calm place in the world, but two, it also smells amazing. See the smell of a brand new book? That one's old now, but amazing, seriously. So I remember picking the book up, reading a couple of pages, and instantly I was like, I'm getting really into this. I'd only read a couple of pages. Some of the things that I was reading, I was like, just sending off fireworks in my brain. I was like, oh my god, like this is how I feel, this is how I think. And I was like, I have to get it. So I got the book. And the man that wrote the book is a philosopher and psychologist. He's a man named Viktor Frankl, an Austrian man who actually survived the Holocaust, which makes this book even more remarkable. He was the founder of logotherapy, which he talks about in this book. Viktor Frankl survived multiple concentration camps and had several encounters, very close encounters to death, literally to the point where there was a line of prisoners getting marched into a line and they were getting split. So as they were coming towards the guard, one man would go here, one man would go here, and they were just, it almost seemed random. They were getting tossed left to right, left to right, left to right. And little did Viktor Frankl know until after the event that if he had gone left, he would be taken to the gas chambers, and if he'd gone right, he would live to see another day. And of course he was selected to go right, which meant he survived this process. And there was so many times during his imprisonment in these concentration camps where he came so close to death. It is honestly, it's disgusting, but it is just remarkable. It's insane. And basically the book is split into two parts. The first part is taken from his experiences and the way he witnessed other prisoners in the concentration camps, and that's the first part, real life experiences. And then the second part is when he goes on to expand about logotherapy and his kind of ideas behind this. And they're kind of intertwined in that some of the things he saw in the first part of the book are linked to his theory in the second part of the book. So initially, Frankl focuses the first part of the book on explaining how the daily struggles of camp life affected the mental state of basically all the other prisoners. Frankl describes the typical prisoner going through three mental stages. And the first one is shock, in the first few days as they arrive at camp. The second one is apathy, so it's almost like an emotional death. And then the disillusionment that the camps faced upon liberation, when they were released from the camps, the ones that survived. And some of the stories that he tells in there are unbelievable. Honestly, unbelievable. The conditions, the environment they were in, what they had to do, the way they were treated, it is horrible. But the core of Frankl's message throughout this book is that a man's deepest desire is to find meaning in his life, and if he can find that meaning, he can survive anything. Most interestingly, Frankl claims that there are three ways to find meaning in life, and I personally agree with him massively on these three things. So the first one is through work, the second one is through love, and the third one is through suffering. Those three things man can find meaning from. And he expands on these 3 points, you know, throughout the book, and also more so in the second section of the book, in the logotherapy section. Part of Frankl's ideas are backed by evidence, so the evidence that he witnessed in the camps. And he noticed that prisoners who were more likely to survive the concentration camps had specific psychological methods of resistance, and these included having some sort of work, some sort of love, or some sort of suffering. If a campmate had attached himself to one of these three things, it gave them that real sense of purpose. They were more likely to survive. So the second part of the book goes on to talk about logotherapy in more detail, and Frankl discusses logotherapy. He discusses the fact that if a man cannot find the meaning or purpose in his life, he can develop mental problems that need to be addressed. And I think this is really a significant point, I think, for men in particular, from personal experience, but also I believe a lot of men could put themselves into this category. If you lack a bit of sense of meaning or purpose or direction in life, you can really start to struggle with it. Frankl then also interestingly talks about tension, inner tension, claims that man is required to have a level of tension, a level of stress on the body day in, day out, in order to really have that sense of fulfillment and meaning and purpose. He talks about that people should not look for that kind of homeostasis, you know, that kind of neutral balance, because that isn't actually a good place to be. You don't really feel good in that state. It's when there's a right amount of tension placed on the body that you start to, you know, have that real sense of purpose and meaning and accomplishment and fulfillment throughout the day. And from my reading of the book, I completely resonate with Frankl's three methods. So for me, the first one about work, when I was a football player, that was like my meaning, my purpose. It got me up in the morning because all I wanted to be was a footballer. Every single minute of my day was dedicated to becoming a footballer. It was almost like this higher sense of purpose, that no matter what was happening in life, as long as I was working myself not to the bone, but working myself into the ground, doing everything I could, it gave me that real sense of meaning and purpose. Every single day, every single week, month, year, I knew the direction I was going in. And that was my sense of purpose and meaning, and I attached myself to this work, which I don't think is a bad thing. But now, with the business that I've got running now, the coaching business, making videos, now I feel, you know, that sense of purpose and meaning again. I've attached myself to this kind of type of work. And I think anyone in their job can attach themselves to like a kind of higher purpose of working towards a bigger goal. Frankl gives a direct example. In the Nazi concentration camps, one could have witnessed that those who knew that there was a task waiting for them to fulfill were most apt to survive. And Viktor Frankl talks about his exact example of this. He said, "As for myself, when I was taken to the concentration camp of Auschwitz, a manuscript of mine ready for publication was confiscated. Certainly my deep desire to write this manuscript anew helped me to survive the rigours of the camps I was in." So the second one is love. Love could come in any type of form. Love for your family, love for your partner, whoever it is you love. That can also, that was actually Viktor Frankl's probably saviour within camp. He talks about the fact he always thought about his wife and visualised, you know, past memories in the future, and this kept him going as well. So for me, the example of love for me would be the love I have for my family, and that's what motivates me. They often motivate me. When I think about them, I think, right, that is what keeps me going. But then sometimes I think, on the other hand, I think about my parents, and you know, the reason they go off to work and they go about their daily life so contently, so consistently, and it's because they have a higher purpose, sense of purpose, in that they have a family, they have love for me and my two other siblings, and they want to look after us, they want to have a nice environment for us. And I almost feel like when you do have a kid, I don't have any kids, you devote yourself to that child and they become that kind of higher sense of purpose and meaning. Work can give you that higher sense of purpose and meaning, love can give you that higher sense of purpose and meaning. And then also, interestingly, Frankl talks about suffering. Now this is probably one of the most interesting ones for me, because I have experienced suffering in the past. Listen, suffering is all relative, okay? So I experienced suffering, and it gave me such a sense of purpose, so much purpose. I was so focused. It was honestly probably the most focused I've ever been in my life, the most dedicated. I was just completely content with my life when I was suffering. So my example would be when I ruptured my ACL. Now, as I said, suffering is all relative, okay? But when I ruptured my ACL, the only thing I had in my mind was to make this knee better, to make it stronger than it was before, prove that I would still be able to play football, to prove to myself, to prove to others, to go make a career in the game. And for the 12 months after my knee operation, literally the day I did my knee, I was like, I was like, wow, this sense of purpose, this higher sense of purpose that I need to do this for me. I need to get this knee back to the way it was. And that was me, that I experienced some suffering and it gave me a higher sense of purpose. Now the most interesting example of this Viktor Frankl draws from the book would obviously be the concentration camps, the amount of suffering that went on there. But that also became a sense of purpose and meaning, because it was like, right, I'm going to survive this. I'm going to survive this amount of suffering, and I'm going to come out on the other side. An amazing direct example from the book about suffering and how people can actually find a real sense of purpose within their own suffering would come in on page 148 of the book. Okay, it talks about a boy named Jerry Long who'd been paralysed from his neck down since a driving accident which rendered him a quadriplegic. So he was 17 when the accident occurred, and basically he can only use his mouth stick to type, and he wrote Viktor Frankl a letter, and this is what he said. I view my life as being abundant with meaning and purpose. The attitude that I adopted on that fateful day has become my personal credo for life. I broke my neck, it didn't break me. I am currently enrolled in my first psychology course in college. I believe that my handicap will only enhance my ability to help others. I know that without the suffering, the growth that I have achieved would not have been possible. And essentially, what this Jerry Long is saying is, in his experience of severe trauma and suffering, in that struggle, that suffering, he found himself basically a higher sense of meaning and purpose. He essentially made it his higher calling in life to show people what he could still achieve, but also to inspire others who may have found themselves in a similar position. And I think that's an interesting example of using suffering to your advantage. Now, not all three of these things, work, love and suffering, are easy to find or to do or to live through. They're not trivial things. So don't feel as though, don't put pressure on yourself to find that piece of work, to find that piece of love, find that suffering within you, okay? So what I would say is there are simpler, more trivial, mundane and ordinary ways of finding meaning in your life. But it's important to break these larger things down into smaller tasks, into smaller actionable things you can do throughout the day. This book is pretty amazing, and it really does, it's opened my mind. And listen, the way I interpret this book may be different from the way you interpret the book, but essentially I'm wanting to share some of the things in here that have helped me that might help you. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of a couple of my favourite bits. One of my favourite bits was the Jerry Long story, the Jerry Long letter about being paralysed and how he overcame the suffering and how he found purpose in the suffering. So I've got two other good bits that I really like that I want to share with you. Here we go. So page 109, Viktor Frankl talks about searching for meaning that may arouse inner tension rather than equilibrium. Okay, so equilibrium is like this kind of neutral, balanced state or feeling. So you don't want that. That is not really what you want. You might think, everyone might think that's what they want, but it's not. You want a level of tension and stress always on the body. So I want to also share with you the three examples from the book that Frankl talks about logotherapy and how he teaches them. As logotherapy teaches, there are three main avenues on which one arrives at meaning in life. So the first is by creating work or doing a deed. So doing a deed for someone or creating work yourself that's going to give you that sense of purpose and meaning. The second is by experiencing something or encountering someone. In other words, meaning can be found not only in work but also in love. But Frankl interestingly actually leaves the third one as the most important factor. Even the helpless victim of a hopeless situation facing a fate he cannot change may rise above himself, may grow beyond himself, and by so doing change himself. So it is possible to turn a personal tragedy into a triumph. I do think this book's pretty incredible. I hope something that I've maybe said is kind of inspired you to go and read this, or just inspired you generally to think about things maybe in life in a different way, and also to try and give yourself some answers about why you might feel a certain way, how you can improve the state that you find yourself in. I could not recommend this book enough. If you're a young man, I would say this is a book you have to read. I hope you enjoyed my little overview of Man's Search for Meaning. I hope you go and read it. If you don't, hopefully that was enough for you. If you're an audiobook kind of person, listen to the audiobook. If you want to chat to me about books, please email me. The link to email me will be below. So the next book in the reading list was actually, someone said to me it was their Bible. Now it's not actually the Bible, but they said to me it was the Bible. And it's this one here. The Chimp Paradox. Apparently this is a Bible. I'm going to tell you all about it in the next video. See you soon.